So recently I've been feeling the itch to do a game jam. So I naturally decided to drop everything I was doing to join one, and make not just one, but two games for one jam. This time, I joined the Boundless Game Jam, hosted by, Reese. I'm not even gonna attempt that last name. Anyways, the theme was one button, so every game in the jam needed to be controlled with, well, one button. Side note. Before the jam theme was announced, I went down a deep rabbit hole researching keyboards since I kinda need a new keyboard. In the process, I learned far more than any reasonable person should know about mechanical keyboards and the entire community surrounding them. Because of this, I thought it would be fun to make my next jam game focused around keyboard input. I didn't know exactly what it would look like, all I knew is I wanted to make the user use the entire keyboard in a unique way. But then, one button. As you can imagine, this kinda put a damper on my plans. I actually almost decided to call it quits and wait for another jam, since it felt like fate was against me. But instead I mauled over the jam theme, trying to think of a good way to squeeze a lot of inputs out of one button. Behold, the scroll wheel, or mouse wheel, or whatever you want to call it. This singular button has not one, not two, but three inputs: up, down, and press. While three inputs gave me pretty much everything I needed to make the next indie platformer, I wanted to make a game that felt more like it was actually designed around a scroll wheel. And what do you do with the scroll wheel? You spin it. And what's the next logical train of thought? Rolling a barrel into a bunch of oversized bowling pins. And now that I had an idea, it was time to get to work. The first thing I did was prototype the barrel movement using basic shapes, but since I didn't record any footage of that, we'll just jump to when I added the visuals. For the art, I just decided to make a bunch of low poly models in Blender. Unfortunately, this plain low poly look wasn't exactly doing it for me, so I just pixelated the entire screen. That's more like it. Once the visuals were in place, I finalized the barrel movement. Getting all the physics for the barrel to work properly was a pain. I mean, look at this absolute mess of code. In the end, I had to set an artificial cap for the barrel's velocity to prevent it from flying off the map every time you so much as breathed. Scrolling the mouse wheel will move the barrel in whichever direction you scroll. Pressing the mouse wheel will switch you into an aiming mode. While aiming, the mouse wheel rotates your view. Pressing the mouse wheel again will then launch the barrel in whichever direction you're looking. Why did I decide to make the game about rolling a barrel? Well, I mean, come on. Rolling barrels are a staple of video games. Just look at Donkey Kong. And it also meant that I could turn the game's name into a pun. Another side note, the second game I made for this jam, Pun Button, is literally just one massive pun, hence the name, about how many different ways I could possibly make the player say one button. But if you want to check it out, I'll leave a link in the description. It literally takes like 30 seconds to play. Anyways, back to Barrel Bowl. I knew from the start that I didn't just want to make a bunch of levels in the same setting, since floating grassy islands aren't exactly the most exciting or original. So I got to work on making 3 different areas for the game, each with 4 levels. I made the second area into a winter wonderland by just recoloring the assets and adding snow. I also made these snowmen, which ended up being the best part of the entire game. For the third area, I went for something more ominous with a retro color scheme. I ended up with orange skies and dark geometric shapes. While it's pretty simple, I think it turned out nice. And for the last level, I just smashed together a bit of each area, and threw in a giant snowman for good measure. To beat each level, you need to knock down all the pins without falling off the map or running out of shots. But since this is a game jam, I wanted the player to see as much of the game as possible. So even if you fail, a big next level button is shoved in your face. And for the more invested players, each level can be replayed in hopes of achieving a legendary 3-star score. With all the levels done, I put together a splash screen and main menu, so the only thing left was to add music and sounds. Out of all the Game Jam games I've made, this one probably ended up with the best audio. My first attempt at the music was pretty terrible. I mean, you can listen for yourself. But after that complete failure, I decided to make something more chill and techno, and it worked out much better. I was going to add music to the levels as well, but I later decided that the levels were better off without music, so instead I just created ambient tracks for the 3 different worlds. The rest of the sound effects in the game were pretty simple. Originally, I made some retro sound effects using SFXR, but to be honest, it sounded kinda horrible. So instead, I made a bunch of more muted sound effects by just making random noises into my microphone. The highlight of the game's audio is the barrel sound. I dynamically changed the volume and pitch of the barrel based on how fast it was moving, which, not to pat myself on the back, turned out really well. With all the sounds done, I used the remaining time to have people playtest my game, and I made changes to the levels where necessary. Once I was happy with the difficulty, I made the itch page and submitted the game to the jam. Of course, there's a link to the game in the description if you want to check it out. Or maybe you just want to roll through a bunch of innocent snowmen. In which case, play level 6. With that said, I think I'll mark this game jam down as a success, and hopefully see you in the next video. Peace out.